I now call the March 24th, 2020 meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. And we are unanimously in order. Before we move to the first agenda item, I want to take a moment to recognize the life and service of former Board of Education member Richard McElrath, Sr. Mr. McElrath, affectionately known as Mr. Mac, was a teacher and coach in CMS schools for more than 30 years. 30 years. He served on this board from 2009 to 2013, representing the mighty District 2. Mr. McElrath was very focused on the importance of how we need to do a better job of educating African American males, and also the need to desegregate our neighborhoods and the connection between segregation in our neighborhoods and segregation in our schools. Mr. McElrath's untiring dedication to this community made a difference in so many lives that his legacy will live on for generations. Mr. McElrath passed away on March 18th, 2020, just a few days shy of his 78th birthday. On behalf of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, we extend our deepest heartfelt condolences to his family and loved ones. May Mr. Mack rest in peace. And so now we're going to have our policy first reading. Lenora Shipp, as a member of the policy committee, will lead us in the first reading of proposed revisions to policy BDD.
Members of the board, the item before us tonight is the first reading on changes to policy BDD, Superintendent Board Relations. The recommended change stems from discussions at the board retreat held on November the 7th and 8th at the CPCC Levine campus in Matthews. Based on those conversations, the policy committee met on November 14th and considered adding language to the policy that calls for the creation of a corresponding regulation. That change was approved by the committee by a 4-0 vote. Madam Chair, I conclude the first reading of policy BDD, Superintendent Board Relations.
Thank you, Ms. Shipp. So now we'll move on to the consent agenda items. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
So moved. Second.
All right, before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this item for individual consideration? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by a show of hands. Madam Clerk, that is 6-0. I do want to announce that we have a vacancy for our appointment to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. So if you have an interest in serving on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, please contact our Board Services Administrator, Nicole Kelly. So we'll now move on to the action items tonight. The first action item, we're going to recommend temporary suspension of one of our bylaws, and this is in light of safety concerns regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Is there a motion to temporarily suspend the physical presence requirement in Section 4A of Board Bylaw BEA to enable this board to meet electronically?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. So basically, this is going to allow us, if we decide that, we're better not meeting in person, this gives us the ability to meet electronically for future meetings. Any further discussion needed before we vote? All right, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by a show of hands. Do we have any opposed? Madam Clerk, that is 6-0. And now It is time for our reports. So, Mr. Superintendent, we will begin with an update on COVID-19. I know that's a lot of information to convey as to what we do know right now, what we don't know yet, and what we've done thus far since our world has changed.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I guess I should speak into the mic. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for this opportunity to provide an update on all of the hard work and that staff has undertaken over the past couple of weeks. And I will start off by sort of framing the discussion and talk about just a little bit about what you can expect to hear tonight. And we have a team who has been working around the clock. Yes, they're smiling now, but they truly have been working around the clock to ensure that while schools are closed for student in-person learning, that the district continues to operate, and we continue to ensure that kids' most basic needs are met from a nutrition standpoint, but also from an educational standpoint. So as you all know, we have been providing frequent updates to board members, and so now we get an opportunity to provide an in-person update. And so some of the things that you can expect to hear about tonight include our meal distribution services that we're providing to students. We'll also talk about our human resources updates, testing updates, deployment of devices to students, remote supplemental learning, our instructional continuity plan, and then also it's important because I don't know that this will get a lot of airtime tonight, but we've got some tremendous partners in our community who have done yeoman's work in terms of helping us supplement what we're providing to our students. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of the community partners, too many to name, and you get in trouble when you start naming individuals or different organizations. So I will just leave it at that. And then there are some things that we just do not have answers to right now. There are so many questions, and we're awaiting guidance from our partners at the state level. I will also say that we have been in contact with our partners at both the state and the local level to provide some support to help us ensure that our employees can continue to be compensated. So with that, I am going to toss it over to Ms. Laura Francisco. She'll come first and provide an update on the school nutrition services operations as it relates to the meal distribution sites, and will be followed by other team members. And then at the end, I'd like to come back and sort of put a bow on things. Ms. Francisco.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Winston, members of the board. I am going to give you some information about our meal delivery and grab-and-go sites, as well as how we are working with some partners and using our transportation during this time. So starting on March 17th, we opened up 69 sites in our schools that are serving as grab-and-go locations, where families can come and receive a lunch and then a breakfast for the next day for any student, or any child, age 1 to 18. The child does not have to attend the school where they're picking up the meal. The USDA has offered some additional flexibility to us in this situation that we don't normally have. So that's one of those flexibilities. As of the end of the day yesterday, we had provided 93,000 meals. I have today's numbers now, so we're up to 116,000 meals. That's breakfast and lunch that we're providing all around the community. The way we're able to do this is through the method that we use when we do our summer feeding sites. So it's that same funding from USDA. And we're staffed by 232 school nutrition employees. They're outside, under tents if necessary, or porticos if it's raining, drive through, providing those meals to families. In addition to that, we have a list of partners there that you will see who are coming to pick meals up and take them further out into the community to sites that we aren't currently having a school site. And I won't read the list to you, but you can see there's a variety of partners that are working with us. Ada Jenkins is actually a pickup site in the north end of the county, which was a concern. So we were able to stand that up. And then to further support the north end of the county and then a few other needs, we have a mobile program going that was started yesterday. It is a bus route up into the north end of the county. The numbers that picked up meals at those bus stops today doubled from yesterday to today. So from 200 to about 400. So that's getting a lot of focus. Starting on Thursday, we're going to have 2 buses delivering foods to our students at Metro. They are far and wide in the county, and they're very specialized diets typically for these students. So that's a little bit of a different effort than the grab and go site. And then we're looking at feedback from principals as to what they're hearing from families where there might still be gaps. So where we're not hitting with a bus, where we're not hitting with a site, where a partner isn't delivering, how can we supplement that? And we're ready to add additional routes as necessary. Finally, our warehouse delivery staff are delivering not only the food to the sites that are preparing, but also instructional materials and second harvest backpacks. So we're really trying to use all of our departments to help this go as efficiently and successfully as possible.
And I'm going to ask us to hold our questions until everyone has had a chance to present.
Good evening, board members. It's my pleasure to come before you and, of course, the public virtually to share an update on human resources. At the last meeting, I was able to share that we were at the beginning stages of transitioning to remote work where applicable, and I can report now that we have done so where it has made sense. For example, all of our teachers are working in a remote capacity. Our teaching assistants, for the majority or the vast majority of our central office staff. Again, any positions where it made sense and that work could be done in a remote capacity or at home, that's what we've encouraged and that's what we have transitioned to. Now we still realize that there are many positions that traditionally cannot be done in a remote capacity. So for those positions, as you know, we've done everything that we can across the district to continue to provide alternative work options for those staff members. Some examples of that include what was just described, for example, in Ms. Francisco's report about meal continuity, serving meals to the community and to students. There are also other essential core business functions that happen that would require periodic visits on site to be able to conduct that business. But again, for the most part, we have successfully transitioned to a remote capacity. For those positions that are continuing to report in person, we are continuing to promote CDC guidelines when it comes to social distancing, as what's being in practice tonight. We're continuing to advise employees to practice those good hygiene habits and to keep the minimum of 6 feet of distance away from others. We are also reviewing new federal legislation that has been enacted that would provide some relief to families, to eligible employees who are impacted by the virus and the situation with schools being closed in the event that they are unable to provide childcare or work remotely. That legislation, as you can imagine, has a lot of implications and it's complex with respect to how it might overlap with other policies that are in place. So right now, staff is currently reviewing the implications of that legislation so that we can communicate with all employees very soon what that impact is, who's eligible, how they can apply. So as of right now, we know that the law provides for paid sick leave to certain eligible employees and for a predetermined amount. It's not something that continues forever. For example, one provision provides for only up to 80 hours, assuming that a person is a full-time employee. and then it gets adjusted accordingly. But again, there's certain eligibility requirements attached to that and would not be applicable to all employees. Some of the act also expands the existing Family Medical Leave Act by providing for provisions related to childcare, having to take care of others who are impacted. So not even if just the employee is impacted by the virus, but if that employee is taking care of others who are impacted, or if they need to take care of their children because sites or schools have been shut down. So again, lots to review. Staff is diligently at work pulling together frequently asked questions and summary information for employees so that those who are eligible can apply. And that concludes my report.
And I apologize, I should have introduced folks as they were coming up. That was Christine Peugeot, our Chief Human Resources Officer. Next up is Dr. Matt Hayes, our Deputy Superintendent in charge of academics. And prior to Christine was Laura Francisco, Assistant Superintendent on the operations side of the house.
So good evening. We just want to cover a couple of things that have come out last week as far as our CMS Instructional Continuity Plan. We just first want to lift up to everyone. These are a couple of things that were sent out to principals as of last week. The end of third quarter will remain the same for this Thursday, March 26th. Friday, March 27th since March 27th has been reinstated as a teacher workday. Midterm exams, all students will be exempt from the midterm exams. Also, digital learning competencies. We do want to share, we've really tried to look over this time of how we can create systems and processes and opportunities for teachers that basically serve two purposes. So we've asked our teachers to go out and really become familiar with a lot of our various digital platforms. In serving them, we basically, Aaron Shoemaker, who is our Director of Digital Innovations and Personalized Professional Learning, actually created 2 courses for them, which allowed them to fulfill their CEU requirements for digital learning competencies, which have to be accomplished in order for their renewal of their license. So once again, great opportunity for them to, one, learn the new platform, but also to receive that credit in doing so. So these are a couple of things also that we just kind of feel like we need to lift up right now. Credit recovery, students participating in credit recovery or in the need for credit recovery can continue to complete this obligation at this time due to the fact that that is previous instruction. Dual enrollment, students who are dually enrolled will move to a virtual platform and continue with the new learning for their continuity courses, college courses, when the community colleges resume. Also, it's been a great opportunity for us. Last week, we received through the Carolina Panthers owner, David Tepper, and the John Belk Foundation Endowment, and the David Belk Cannon Foundation. They announced a $1 million gift to the CMS Foundation for the COVID-19 Relief Fund. This gift will be used to purchase 6,000 mobile hotspots with 6 months prepaid internet service for our students without access to home connectivity, which is phenomenal for those. Those are coming in now, and we're working with our principals to notify us on who the individuals are that need to have those. So a couple things we want to look at. Right now, we're in supplementary learning opportunity. Basically, this is opportunities for our students to engage in supplementary learning. It's not graded or assessed and provides human touch points, check-ins from the teachers with their advisors, and alignment to our SEL support and learning. When the time comes that we will transition, hopefully, to the remote core instruction, once that designation has been passed to us from the state, we are ready to launch that plan. We are developing that this week. It is under development. We basically are waiting on that guidance from the state. This is where we are looking at basically a cross-functionality of departments, which include our EC department and also our EL department. We're making sure that we have pathways for all students. And we're also creating opportunities for students to continue to read through ebooks, which is an online system for ourselves. And PD is also being provided not only just for our teachers, but also we have several opportunities for our parents to learn as well. The expectation here is to the district to provide resources as provision as optional supplemental resources for March 19th through the 27th, and do these routine check-ins with students, which will begin on March 23rd, this past Monday. So this is under consideration. Excuse me, Jess. Sorry, I slipped past that. So this is under consideration. This is a draft of CMS guidelines for our fourth quarter remote core instruction once the state has allowed us to move forward with this. CMS is developing content-based work plans that support our non-digital remote core instruction for students. And then CMS, we are also developing content-based work plans that support the digital remote core instruction for our students. And then in 6 through 12, CMS is developing remote learning tools to support delivery of digital content with the core instruction. We're also partnering with our CMS teachers to assemble remote core content through the Canvas for select courses and content considered as our high priority. So I'm going to also take you through our Office of School Performance, which is headed by Kathy Elling. So basically right now what they're doing is they're supporting the learning community, through the learning community superintendents to the principals with virtual one-on-one meetings. They are also doing virtual learning community meetings and updating our principals on current events and situations that are happening as a result of COVID-19. Collaboration in academics on remote learning is also taking place, utilizing our LC SUPs to gather information for us that's critical to make sure that what we are developing is meeting the needs of our principals and also our classroom teachers. Our Exceptional Children's Department is preparing a transition to new learning. Ann Stahlnaker, who heads that department, has done a phenomenal job in working with our state to make sure that we are in compliance if we, or as we hopefully will transition into the new learning process. Student service team is also providing a wide range of direct supports for students, which also include counseling, student check-ins. Social workers are checking on our students, helping parents have access to food and resources that are within their community. And I think with this, what we're really trying to just state here is that although we may look different, we're still providing the services that we need to for our families through the office. So, Office of Equity and Accountability, a waiver has been sought by the North Carolina Department of Instruction to cancel all federal mandated assessments and accompany the accountability measures for integrate and EOC testing at this point in time. We do understand that once the waiver does return back, that we also will be waiting on our General Assembly to also allow us to move away from that for this upcoming year. State required tests, which are the NCFEs, we will be looking to also have that also to be waived as well. The International Baccalaureate IB and Cambridge have canceled their spring assessments, and the College Board has decided to offer modified advanced placement exams that will be shorter, 45 minutes in length, and can be taken at home on any device. So this is a couple of important reminders for everyone. Educator communications, we have on our website on the intranet. Please visit for all of our teachers and also to our principals. We have instructional resources there, guidance, resources, and support options that are there. That's an internal facing. We also have on our parent portal an external facing community resources. We encourage all of our parents to visit this, all of our community members. It also provides CMS learning plan guidance, resources, and also support options there. Device deployment families that are in child's grades 4th through 12th that need a device. We are asking that you please reach out to your school, notify your school if you need those devices. Right now, and I know that Mr. Root's going to present in just a few minutes, we need the assistance of our parents out there. If you are in need of a device, if you are in need of Wi-Fi, we strongly encourage you to reach out to your child's teacher. They will reach out to the principal of the school, and then they will communicate with us what is needed. The last thing that I will ask for is a little bit of grace and support to our teachers. I will tell you that many of our teachers did not go to school to teach virtually. And our principals did not go to school through their admin degrees to run buildings that are operating virtually. Please use them. Go through your child's teachers just as you would on a normal school day. If something that's happening with the virtual learning, if there's questions about assignments, if there's questions about items that are due, we strongly encourage you to first talk to the teacher, and then follow the same course of action you would on a regular school day, speaking to the principal and so forth. Sometimes we've had calls into central office, and they've been hard for us to answer. And what we end up having to do is call the teacher or contact the principal that contacts the teacher. So please stay into that regular regiment in communicating with your child's teachers from here on out until we move to hopefully back into a regular setting of education. I will now turn it over to Mr. Root.
Good evening, members of the board. Superintendent Winston, thank you for having me this evening. I wanted to provide an update on our deployment of technology during the COVID-19 crisis. On the screen here, you'll see a graph that shows our schools and our deployment status as a total as a district. You'll see that 65% of our schools are reporting a maximum deployment, and by maximum deployment, we mean they have handed out 90% or more of the devices in their building to students. The next number you'll see is the partial deployment, 29%. 29% of our schools have handed out between 60 and 89% of the devices within their buildings. And then the small number of 6% is minimal deployment. Those would be schools that have handed out 59% or less of the devices in their buildings. Now, what that means is, let me stop and thank our learning community superintendents and our principals, because without the hard work that they have put in over the last several days and over the weekend, collecting this data would have been very, very difficult. And it's through their grassroots efforts of handing out the technology that we've been able to get to the levels that we are. So I do want to share with you, though, that some people might think that 29 or the 6% is a negative. I don't want you to assume that it is, because in many of our schools, our students are reporting that they have access to technology and they don't need to take our technology home. And if that's the case, we don't force them to take it. We're giving it to those kids that are in need. Secondly, that allows us some surplus technology, so that if we find more children in need, like in the K1, 2, and 3 space, that we have that surplus technology that wasn't forced home with a student available to us to then start sending into the lower grades. Wrong button, sorry. Next slide. I took the same data basically and broke it down by learning community. I assumed the board would want to know how their own learning communities were doing with the technology deployments. Again, I won't read the numbers, but you'll see some drastic differences between the learning communities. With the exception of that minimal deployment number, you don't see a lot of that in any of our learning communities. That number stays pretty low, I think below 7%, maybe 7.5% in one Central 2 community. So again, those schools are often self-reporting as we don't need to send any more technology home. We're good. Our students are covered. Huntingtown Farms would be a great example. Most of their students claimed that they had technology, didn't need any. I also want to let you know this data is 2 days old now, as we surveyed up through the weekend and then compiled data yesterday and today, and several of our schools have gone through additional deployments, so those numbers will shift. As we get those, I will share those with the board. One slide I did not put together, and that Mr. Hayes spoke about, is the deployment of the 6,000 hotspots. And the reason you don't have a slide on that is because we have not yet deployed any hotspots. We've received so far 100 of the 6,000 in the mail. They're coming from all over the country. Hotspots are a hot item right now, of course, in the nation. So they're being brought to us from all over the place, as far away as Las Vegas even, for a shipment of those hotspots. As we receive those hotspots, we will prepare those, inventory them, and deliver them out for distribution through our schools, as you heard Mr. Hayes speak about. And the way we're going to do that or tackle that problem is we're going to start with our students that are have housing challenges. So our McKinney-Vento students are probably going to get the first 300 or 400 of those hotspots that show up. Then we're going to focus our efforts on middle schools because we have done no work in middle schools when it comes to hotspot deployment. As you're all aware, we have the 1 million project that we've been deploying hotspots into high schools. We've done over 10,000 of those. So we know our high schools are mostly covered and are going to need some holes plugged here and there. So we're going to focus on middle schools, and then we will go in either direction, downgrades and upgrades with the 6,000 hotspots that we receive. Again, another update on those will come to you as we receive the hotspots and start actually handing them out. And with that, I will wrap up my presentation and take any questions, I guess, for the whole group then.
So is that the last?
You want to do a vote?
I believe I'm it, yes. I believe I was the last, yes.
And before board members ask any questions that you all may have, I do want to touch on a couple of points that I think our community probably has questions about. Maybe some of you have questions about regarding the announcement by Governor Cooper via his executive order yesterday to extend school closures through May 15th. I was on a call this morning with superintendents from across the state, and there are many questions that remain. We're working through exactly what that means for each of us, but also we have lots of questions about, the transition at some point from remote supplemental learning to core new instruction. But those are questions that we have, and I know we want answers, our families want answers, and as soon as we get that information, we'll be providing updates to the board and families and our members of our community so that they can be abreast on exactly what that means. Secondly, I would like just to touch briefly on an order here in Mecklenburg County that was issued today around a stay-at-home order. And again, that was just announced a few hours ago, and we're again working with our partners across the county to determine what impact that may or may not have on CMS. As we understand it at this particular point, essential services such as families and staff members providing meal distribution or coming to pick up meals or other devices, that is certainly allowed within that order. So that's what we know at this point. There may be some other impacts. For example, I know that the county has indicated that its playgrounds, that they're going to kind of rope those off and not, allow anyone to be able to use those. And so certainly we may be impacted because we have playgrounds at our school sites, but those are things that we're working through. And as we know more, we'll be sharing that with our board and members of our community.
Okay. Thank you. So while we have Mr. Root at the podium, do we have any questions about technology deployment? Ms. Sawyer?
I was just wondering how we are on numbers. I know we've had one-to-one technology in many schools. So is there capacity for extending our technology below third grade across the board, or do we run out of technology because we need spares?
So that will vary a little bit. For the most part, you're correct in your one-to-one assumptions. A couple things have come into play. We do stock our schools on an N+60 model, so there's always 60 spares in a school to allow for breakage and that sort of thing. But taking into account other programs, Title I, ELL, and other programs that are available, we have more Chromebooks available to us. So many of our schools have been able to go down into the lower grades, and we actually have gotten waivers from the Title I administrators that we are allowed to send Title I devices home, which under normal circumstances is not allowed. But as long as they stay within the Title I community of that school, and we're not sending a Title I device to a non-Title I school, then we're allowed to send those Title I devices home. So yes, we are starting to push down into the lower grades. I can't say that we're going to cover every kid all the way down to K, but we are going to be able to push down into lower grades.
Thank you.
Ms. Marshall and then Ms. Shipp.
You hit on this just a minute ago. Families have things that are broken because we know technology breaks.
Yeah.
What should families do at that point?
So that is a little bit in question right now. As Mr. Winston spoke earlier, we are going to probably view our repair and distribution pipeline as essential services in order to keep the devices working. Now, the typical process would be student would turn their device in at school, get a new device, then that device makes its way off to the workshop to be repaired and eventually comes back to the school. Of course, we're in unprecedented times right now, so we're trying to figure out how we're going to manage the distribution and delivery of those devices. I don't have a good answer for you on that right now because we're just like the conversation started 2 hours ago upstairs as the county made its announcement. So it kind of changed the game on us a little bit. The previous plan was to go through our typical courier system and continue to work that way, but now we've got to retool a little bit. So stand by, I'll give you more information on that as we get a game plan together.
Okay.
Ms. Shipp?
Yes, thank you for your work with the technology. I know that in K2, the students, especially in our Title I schools, we had iPads, and I hadn't heard you mention anything specifically about those because I know those were used differently than Chromebooks. So I know that those are available in the schools, but I also know that the K2 students could use any technology to do RASKids, A to Z, Dreambox, Study Island. These are programs that the children already were used to using and how to log in and get those. And if they have any technology from home, it was already set up for them to do that. So I know the question about what are we doing with K2, I think there was a lot of programs out there for them. But I don't know, I guess the question would be what they're doing with the use of iPads and if those were being deployed, because I know we had not in the past for the lower grades.
So we are not recommending that our schools deploy their iPads with a few exceptions. And I'll share those with you in a moment. But the primary reason for not deploying our iPads, and we have about 11,000 iPads in our fleet, so we have a good number of them. But the primary reason is our iPads do not have content filtering on them when they leave the CMS network. Our Chromebooks are content filtered, and we feel strongly that by sending a device home, we're extending that bubble of protection around that device. And with our iPads, we do not do that. Now, the one exception, or a few of the exceptions that I will share with you, are in a few of our special programs. Take the Metro School, for instance, where we have exceptional children there who need access to their iPad, very often just for communication, and that's how they communicate through their iPad. So we have built a special program. It actually deployed today. We supplemented their numbers of Chromebooks so that there's an iPad. Chromebooks are on the brain. There's an iPad for every student in the Metro School, for instance, and those devices will be going home with the kids, and they will be filtered. So we lock them into a state where only certain apps can run. So many of the things you just spoke about will be the only things the iPad can do, but it will be sufficient for the needs of those students.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. I guess I was a little surprised when I heard about our 6,000 hotspots, and I guess I thought they were all here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, because I got a lot of questions about them already. We'll be receiving them. They offered me batches of 400 to 500 at a time. The first 100 were just some that were nearby, but the shipments are starting to come in within the next few days. There'll be 400 or 500 at a time. So it will take us a good 2 weeks to receive them all and start to turn them back out to our students again.
Okay, so do we have to do anything to them?
They come activated already. The only thing we have to do is marry the serial number to the student just so we know where they are. They would also like to track the data usage on those hotspots. They are on unlimited data usage, by the way, so we had gone in assuming that a student would need at least 20 gigs of data on their wireless, and at that level, they decided to just make them unlimited.
Wow.
So they have unlimited. So if there's multiple students in a household, 3 or 4 can connect to it at the same time, and they won't worry about running out of data.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Mr. Strain?
Hi, Mr. Root, thanks for your update. You had talked about the metric of the percentage of devices that had been handed out and recognized that just because that's a low number doesn't necessarily mean anything. We can't really read anything off of that. So the other metric that you talked about was the percentage of students that are saying they either do or still require technology and a device at home as well as connectivity. Do we have statistics on that in terms of both? I think what we're talking about is 3rd through 12th at this point, right? We'll get to K2 and the instructional side as well as that. But in the first instance, do we have the figures in terms of student coverage?
So I don't have hard figures on student coverage for a school that may have reported as partial or minimal deployment. What I have is principal comments, and those are very hard to parse into a presentation for the board. So we have taken that down to about a dozen schools where the comments indicated we have more students that need devices than have taken them. And so now we've gone after an effort to either entice those families to come in and get the devices, my staff, and with the help of some of our hourly employees you heard that still need work to do, have been going out and helping schools sort of get the Chromebooks out of their carts or hand them out as need be. We'll do a big deployment, a push at Ranson tomorrow, for instance. Was one of the schools that was of a lower pickup rate than they felt was necessary. So the principal there did a big media push and has convinced a lot of families to come in. I'm sure the announcement from the county today will help drive that traffic as well, too, into the schools. So yes, we do kind of know how they are. It was just very hard to show you on a screen because they were principal comments within a survey that let us know. So we are able to track and know who we need to go after from a building perspective to get devices out.
Great. I want to pick up on this younger grades as well. So at this point in time, we're really looking at, is it 3 to 12, 4 to 12 that we're assessing? And then we talked about the fact that there may be opportunities. In fact, you talked about opportunities actually to drive that into some of the lower grades. So what does that process look like? And the coverage in terms of driving that into the lower grades?
We have already seen it happening. Again, there's a lot of grassroots work going on. Those of you who are around principals know they're very enterprising individuals, and they often have plans within plans. So our schools that had available technology have already been pushing down into the lower grades. And we've gotten a lot of that, again, in the survey results that we have, a lot of that information came in. What we will do is with schools that start to request that for the lower grades, I have some of my schools that had leftovers from their deployments. We'll start to shift that technology around and start to, as I said, plug up those holes in the lower grades, more on an as-request basis. And I don't want to get into the curriculum piece of it, but a lot of what Matt and his team have done is around, those lower grades working in a different environment than the older kids are working in. So we will support, and I believe continue to support, any students in the K1, 2, 3 space that need technology. Levine Middle College, they reached out and said, hey, we're closed. I have 200 Chromebooks down here. Come get them if you need them. So it's going to be that kind of a jostling of technology. And then in the summer, we'll have to rebalance and get it all back where it belongs.
Yeah, the
again.
logistics
That'll
of
be
getting them all
interesting,
back into place.
Yes. So we're going to kind of tackle the problem through that approach.
Right, okay. And what we're talking about is deploying Chromebooks into the lower grades, as you mentioned, not the iPads, but
Yes.
Chromebooks.
Correct.
And so for some of those will be new technologies then, right? So they're used to using iPads. These will be Chromebooks.
They're used to Chrome.
Obviously, there's a bit of a learning curve there in terms of some of these students getting used to using the Chromebooks, whereas our older kids, have been using them in classes in schools for quite some time.
Yeah.
So,
Again, some of that will be by request. I don't know that we will go and try to blanket the entire K1, 2, and 3 population of the district. I think we'll do it somewhat on request. And our younger kids do use Chromebooks, so yeah, we do focus more on the iPads with those younger kids, especially down in the K primary grade space. But those older kids do use the Chromebooks, and they do take their tests on them and things, so they have been exposed to them in the schools as it is. We're just not one-to-one in the elementary schools. Most of them still have them dispersed through the school on a daily basis, so a lot of our kids are touching the Chromebooks every day anyway.
great.
Yeah.
Great.
Anything else?
That's it on the technology.
I guess my only question is, as our employees are distributing the technology to students and their families, how do we handle social distancing and safety in that regard? I'm assuming it's sort of like when someone goes to the grocery store, there's just sort of minimal contact, but you've got to
Sort
have
of
a
a
little bit of
drive-through
a handoff.
methodology that we're using. It's been more of, most of our schools have done something to the effect of setting up a tent and they're handing it through the window as people arrive.
Okay.
So there's been very much the drive-through mentality. You come up, you get radioed in that you're here to get your Chromebook, we get your student name, we zap it into the system, hand it to you, and you drive along. So there's been pretty minimal contact. I have not been to every one, obviously, but what I've seen has been through minimal contact via, like, we're working outside of the building even, we're not even coming into the building to get the devices.
Okay, wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Mr. Hayes? Do we have any academic questions? I'll try to wind our way back. Ms. Shipp?
Yes, Mr. Hazeman, I want to thank you for what you're really doing and the support with the students in this academic piece. I think, I know we got lots of check-ins from the teachers, making sure that they're calling the students every day or weekly. I guess I'm asking, how well are we checking in on our teachers? Because I think several teachers were overwhelmed. Like you said, they had to do PD, and then they also had to get lessons set up. And I think there was some confusion about where they start in March the 23rd. Some parents thought they already started. You probably heard that the first week. And so teachers were kind of concerned, and I think some of the administrators were pushing teachers to get some of the things done as soon as possible. So I guess my question is, are we continuing to check in on our teachers who also have children at home? And it's a whole different way of doing things.
Well, and that's what led me to my final comment when I was saying to give a little grace.
Yes.
Because we have teachers that are at home developing lessons, and at the same time, although they're supplementary lessons, also at the same time having their own children at the house. So we have to remember that they're not just sitting, and they're doing everything that a regular family does while also trying to provide those services. So we definitely understand that. But we've even had, right now, we've had 2,000. We did a virtual training for them. So we've had 2,000 teachers that have signed up for the Canvas training just during this week. And to be honest with you, that's really what we designed this week to be, is with the supplementary, is to basically give them the time to onboard through the new Canvas, through some of the new virtual systems and platforms that we have, to make sure that when the time comes that we potentially would go with new content, they'd be able to run at a much faster rate. But you're exactly right. But we do have check-ins. If you notice, one of the things we were talking about, LC Soups are doing a phenomenal job. They're on phone calls every single day with the principals, checking in with them, asking them to check in with their teachers, and then the teachers are checking in with the students. So there's just a reciprocal effect there. But we're also saying, make sure that they understand the resources that are provided to them as well in support.
And are we being real clear with I think it was concerned that parents thought they were supposed to have work done within that first week. And I've heard this concern where parents were calling teachers saying, or teachers were calling parents saying, checking in, did your child get that work finished? And they were assuming it's going to be graded. So I just think we need to be real clear on what does it mean, supplemental work, what was expected within these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's why we really encourage, that's one of the things about us launching the outward-facing on our website for parents, because it's very clear on there what supplementary means and what that process looks like that they're going through right now, and how that would potentially transition later on. But you're exactly right. And some of that is just teachers are designed to provide curriculum, get it back, and give feedback to students with a grade. So this is just different for them, right? And so we have to understand we've asked them to kind of pause in that and kind of go a different route. And we just have to give them a little bit of leniency in which to do that as they kind of learn a new path with teaching and learning right now. So we definitely will make sure we continue that.
And this is my last question, and this is important because they're coming to the end of third quarter. There was questions about work that hadn't been turned in already, and as you know, they're concerned, if I didn't turn that work in already, what happens as you get ready to assess third quarter, especially in high school, and where they're saying they didn't get a chance to turn in their work, and they had from January to now to do it. Are we looking at clearly making sure they know how that's going to work?
Yes, ma'am. And what we've done with that is, in an email we sent out last week with some guidance to our principals, we allowed them to basically utilize the same opportunities that they would in a normal setting for their students, because that is prior learning. And so they basically followed suit with what they would normally do in a normal transition at the closure of third quarter. We felt that was just the more ideal way to just make sure that there weren't any gaps that were created.
Thank you
ma'am.
so much.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. I had some questions about Metro. I think I heard that Metro was one-to-one with iPads. Was that, or did I mishear?
I think that there are some folks who use iPads at Metro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we supplement Metro. We're supplementing Metro with additional iPads to get them to a one-to-one state
Okay,
today.
so that's our goal, to get them to one-to-one.
We did that today. So they
Oh.
are there today.
Okay.
They're loaners. At the end of this crisis, they'll distribute them back to where they belong, but they are one-to-one today.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so did the parents come pick it up, or did we deliver it to them, or how did they? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, while Mr. Root walks up here, let me also just kind of share with you guys. So one of the things that happened today, and I only know this because there's another individual in my house that was making all these phone calls to principals today, is they are on their third round of checks with principals on what students' needs are around devices and also with Wi-Fi services. So we're trying to just, with each of those, kind of narrow the scope of who those individuals are that are in our communities that have that need as well. So I just wanted to state that I know we had the information that came across to Mr. Root's team, but they are also taking those extra steps, all of the Learning Community SUPs and executive directors. We're doing that today.
Yeah, and again, I can't stress how much the work that they're doing is informing us and therefore informing you of what our status is, because this is a grassroots phone calls. They're calling their families directly, effort to find out exactly what their needs are. So the Metro School is, I do not believe they have deployed their iPads to the students yet. My team was there today delivering the last of the supplemental iPads and finishing the final configurations, as you heard me say, to kind of lock them into a state to make them go home. Whether they've handed any out or not, I don't know. I'll have to follow up tomorrow. And if you need me to respond to you on that, I can do so.
No, that's fine. I wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand.
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Marshall?
Just want to first put some context again around where we are. 2 weeks ago in our meeting, we were in a very different place. And so in 2 weeks, we have basically upended public education in every way that it has been delivered for probably 300 years. And we've had to do it in 2 weeks. And so that means the development of the curriculum, the teacher input, family input, and obviously technology to get to this point. So it's incredible. And I want to say that in my conversations with people from other parts of the state, they aren't anywhere near this. And so the fact that we have put, if you got a number, maybe we're north of 100,000 Chromebooks in children's hands, would we not?
Oh, I would say definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yes, well, yes.
That's enormous. So these are monies that our county and our state has given us for instructional materials, and we've put them where they needed to be. They are not in a closet in a school. They are in students' hands right now. So I just can't emphasize enough how important that is to our community to know that our schoolhouse has no walls now. And so I think that's where we all need to be. And there's a lot of grace here as we've talked about that word with our teachers and with our parents. Today I received an email from a very frustrated elementary parent who is very capable and who was very overwhelmed with how we are, how this is going. And I'm sure that over time that will become a little clearer, although we still have there's so many more questions. Every day is more questions than we seem to have answers for. And then I've also seen emails and tweets from parents on why aren't we moving ahead? Why is this supplemental? And I think, again, to put some context around this, the state of North Carolina dictates sort of what counts. And we're still in that phase where we're trying to find out. But this opportunity right now for supplemental gives us time to kind of work the kinks out, so to speak. So I think everybody just needs to remember that. Everybody's got a lot on their plates. Can you speak, I know I've given a lot of context here, just some words to our, particularly, I think, our elementary school parents, where this is so new for them. High school kids are certainly more capable. This is where they've been headed. But our elementary and middle, can you just sort of give some words of wisdom to our parents on how they should approach this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is take a deep breath.
Yeah.
I mean, really, honestly, it's just take a deep breath and realize that our teachers are doing the best they can with the resources that they're being provided right now. It'll get clearer, it'll get much more precise as the weeks continue. But they're learning, right? Everybody's in a learning stance right now, also as we're hunkering down with families and supporting our own kids. And I think that's the main message I would say to them. But I also want to lift up, we've got some phenomenal individuals in this district that have created all of these resources. And they have taken time away from their own families in which to create this. They have launched this in a very short time period, which it'd be very easy for me to argue that if you would have gone out to a vendor, this would probably have been a 2 to 3 to 4 month process, if not longer, in which to develop. And they've been able to, like you said, turn on a dime and have it ready, which is phenomenal. Our principals, the same way, So the main thing I would say to parents, especially at the elementary level, you probably in many of our elementary schools is where teachers have the closest contact with their students. And that's where I say, if something comes up that you have a concern about or that you have questions about, reach out to the teacher. That's what they want you to do. If for some reason you can't get clarity there, reach out to the principals. Our principals are working. They're not just sitting at home. They're not sitting in their building somewhere. They are working. And they want to make sure that our teachers are supported, and they want to make sure that every single child in their schools are supported as well. So I just say don't lose that part of the work that we're in. Make sure that you're still using the same format that you would if we were in a regular session.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Strain?
Thank you. So, Dr. Hayes, a couple of questions. One is around the K-3 curriculum. So I think as we were talking about the technology deployments and driving that technology deployment down into the lower grades, I'm thinking about the fact that we've got technology that's being deployed into those grades and yet a non-digital curriculum. Although I certainly understand that there are certain communities, teachers, PLCs, et cetera, who have been innovating and building and driving some digital content as well. So how is that working in those lower grades where we don't have one-to-one coverage? However, we're pushing into that. Are there opportunities to drive some digital content as well?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we've got digital boards choice boards that students can work with in kindergarten through third grade. Basically, they just have to go on and as far as any online system and execute on that. Once again, any of our parents that have questions about any of that content or where it's located, they can go to the CMS website and you'll see a parent kind of portal right there. They can click on that. It can take them through each one of those and how to log in. Now, we also understand that we have some of our students who don't have digital access at home. And so what we've done for them is last week we used our own print shop and we basically printed the entire week of content for those students, and we had it at our food distribution sites for them to pick up. Right now we are getting ready to go to print again for next week's. So we're going to stay a week ahead and make sure that we have that provision for our students that may not have that same opportunity or accessibility.
Super. Appreciate it. And in terms of the supplemental instruction that's taking place now, we know, as Ms. Marshall discussed, that we've got some restrictions currently. Where do we stand in terms of those conversations at this point? Who are you looking to, or where are you looking to say, yep, we can move forward? And I fully recognize this is going to be a discussion, but I think it's important that we share that with the community, that not only the statement, well, we're kind of waiting on somebody, but let's talk about our preparedness to move forward and precisely who and where those conversations stand.
So I will let Superintendent Winston address that as you guys go through the conversation a little bit. But the one thing I will say to you is that as a district, if given the opportunity, we're ready to lift up new instruction as early as the beginning of next week.
Hear that, Raleigh?
And that's going to, there's a lot of people that are probably watching this right now that cringe a little bit because they know that they're basically burning the midnight oil to get that done. But that's a commitment, and that we want to have to our students. And people need to understand that we're ready to do that work. Like I said, once again, Ann White has done a phenomenal job with her team in the EC department to make sure with hours served, how are we serving all of our students, that call-ins, virtual meetings, whatever it takes, they're willing to do that on various platforms that we have provided to us to make sure that all of our students are provided a good, sound education during this time that they're doing the virtual learning.
The only thing that I would say to build off of what Dr. Hayes said is that certainly while we have many questions and we're asking those questions of our partners at the state level, we are continuing to plan at the same time for what we believe is the inevitable, so that when that decision is made and it's shared with districts, we're able to move forward and we don't have to spend that time planning. So just to build off of what was shared.
So what I'm hearing is we're prepared to move forward from next Monday, and we're awaiting word from Raleigh, State Board, General Assembly, State Superintendent, somewhere in there, Governor, to give us clearance to do so, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, sir, and in full transparency, I will tell you that we would probably launch first with our high schools and our middle school. They're ready to roll. I mean, for most of our high schools, probably about 80% of our teachers have their content already online. Basically, we're having to hold them back from taking, from being able to run. In our elementary, we would probably, that launch would probably be around Wednesday of next week, which would give us enough time to make sure that those packets are out to all of the food distribution sites to make sure that those students are starting, and we would actually begin with the 4th module of learning at that point in time, and we would basically stop, just kind of sever the 3rd module of learning and move to the 4th, which would allow us to start directly with 4th quarter instruction.
And if I could chime in, what I'm hearing from some of the folks I'm talking to in Raleigh is that every district is in a very different place right now, and they're trying to meet the needs of all the children in North Carolina equitably. And so that is part of the challenge, is that we might be ready to roll, and some other districts might need a whole lot more support before they're ready to roll, and they might not want to get into a place where we have this huge divide in our state. There might be some lessons that districts can learn from one another, and that we can lift up that folks at the state level can carry back to other districts. So those conversations are going on right now, and I think are part of, as complicated as things are for us, it's even more so for them.
Sure.
So I think that's part of the pace, what seems like a slow pace right now.
Sure.
But I know our kiddos are chomping at the bit to move forward.
Yeah, and I'll share that as being good stewards of the work, Brian Kingsley has met with CAOs across the state as well and has offered them some of this opportunities, this information, as far as sharing out with them as well. So we're not just kind of keeping it right in. And so if there are other districts that are interested in finding out about anything that's happening, we welcome them to be on a call to share that information as well.
Awesome, thanks. Dr. Hayes, I'll wrap with the comment you made about calls going out from the House. And looking at the needs of individual schools, right? We talked with Mr. Root a little bit about this as well, and understanding what those requirements are. I don't think we can say enough to lift up the Tepper family and the Belk family for their tremendous contribution in bridging a gap that we identified. One of the things that I want to make sure of is that whilst we came forward and said, we're looking to raise $1 million for 6,000 hotspots with 6 months service, that we understand that's not going to get us all the way there. And so we need to continue to assess to identify what that complete coverage would be for all of our kids, right? Both on the Chromebook sides in terms of getting the devices out there, as well as, full coverage, as well as those hotspots. So certainly appreciate that, and Mrs. Hayes as well for working in the Southeast Learning community to get that done.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Sawyer?
I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Dr. Hayes, or for Ms. Peugeot, but I know there's some confusion or angst among teachers about how they're to, if they're to track their time, how they're to track their time. Will they be evaluated on their Canvas classrooms? Those kinds of things. Do you have any words of wisdom on that, about how they should approach this? This is a brand new world for them, and for many folks it's sort of uncertain.
Hello, I'm happy to take that question. With respect to time, in accordance, and because we want to make sure that we comply with federal laws like Fair Labor Standards Act, so on and so forth, especially that's particularly important with our non-exempt employees. So we have distributed a timesheet for non-exempt to record their time that's done in a remote capacity. Any time up until this point and continuing that has to be done on site, then they are using time clocks to record that time. With respect to exempt staff, that's not the same. We continue to operate our monthly payroll, and people are still continuing to submit leave requests if they would like to have time off from work, so those are still being processed. With respect to observations, the guidance that we've recently received from the state is that observations are still expected to occur. However, the domains that are targeted are more limited now, so that we only look at the domains that are related and can be observed through a virtual platform as opposed to a face-to-face platform.
Thank you. And while you're there, I just want to thank you for extending the opportunities to hourly staff to participate in various staff development trainings. I think that's a great opportunity. Are staff like TAs and BMTs, do they have technology so that they can support either instruction or just checking in with kids?
Yes, ma'am. And I just want to share with you guys, our TAs and our principals are doing some phenomenal things out there with their TAs. The LC Soups actually created best practices for our staff within their buildings. So they went out to all principals across the district so they can learn from each other as they go through this new type of learning. But I mean, some of our TAs are being used to, some of our are doing recording themselves with read alouds. Some are translating the books and doing things like that in the convenience of their home, but with the materials that they're able to take home with them and work remotely. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Dr. Hayes, before you leave.
Yes, ma'am.
Before you escape.
I wasn't running, I promise. No.
Oh,
So as far as the platform for the digital teaching and learning, is it 100% Canvas, or do we still have, if some teachers are accustomed to Google Classroom, can they still use Google Classroom? And I understand there's some Zoom going on, and is it all of the above, or are we really pushing everyone towards just Canvas?
So because we went with an earlier start date, because of the movement of the state, we basically gave everyone the opportunity to continue on with Google Classroom or to use Canvas. What we've done right now, as I stated, so out of about 9,400 teachers, we've got about 2,000 of them that have signed up for learning on the Canvas platform. When hopefully we're given the opportunity to move forward with new instruction, we will be looking towards moving everyone towards that Canvas platform as being the sole platform. You can access your Google accounts through the Canvas platform. So that's right now what we want to do is give our teachers an opportunity to learn and be comfortable with the Canvas platform if that time and when that time comes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I have a question, and I don't know if you're the one to answer this or not, but about social emotional learning and the mental health of our students while they're home, and how are we able to support that?
Yes, ma'am. Everything that happens as we would have in a routine of a normal school. Same thing's happening right now. So social workers are reaching out to the students. They're making contacts with students. We have individuals that we just dealt with a situation last week where we had some information that came across through some emails. We were able to find out who the student was and reach out directly to that student and provide support. So the difference here is that students don't always see their classmates at school. So what we would encourage our students to do is, report those things, right? So just the same way you would on a regular day. And if you see a classmate or a friend that's having a hard time with being in this type of environment, reach out to us and let us know. Reach out to the school, reach out to the principal. If you can't do that, then definitely reach out to myself or to Superintendent Winston or any of you. I mean, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our students, although this is a different situation, that they're supported from every day that they're at home.
And I have heard, as some other board members have said tonight, I have heard some angst from parents, especially parents of little children, who were really stressing over how to do the assignments that were provided and how to get them uploaded, and just really stressing. And I've tried to tell people, this is transition time. We're all experiencing some trauma right now, and it's okay to I hope that's okay that I've said, just let it go. Just, you tell your little child they don't have to do all these assignments. This is supplemental right now, and the most important thing is to give your kid a hug and just, just sort of adapt to this new routine that we're in.
Exactly, and I echo that is basically be a parent, right? So I don't mean to, but I mean, that's your opportunity that in this, right now where we are, if you feel that it's too stressful for your child, then opt out.
Yeah.
This is an opt-in process or a mandatory process that has to take place. And then, like I said, once again, but we also have to understand that on the other side of that is the teacher who's been trained as a professional to provide instruction to a child. So if for some reason you've decided as a family not to follow through with completing certain assignments that may be assigned, they don't have to be completed, reach out to the teacher and say, we're electing during this week not to participate in this learning, the supplementary learning, which is perfectly fine. But unless you do that, the teacher, in their best service to each of their children in their class, are going to continue to reach out because they may think that the student doesn't have the devices that they may need or the resources that they may need, and we've asked them to do that, to check in with the children in their classroom. So just if that's something that you've decided to do as a family, just reach out to the teacher and just let them know, and that gives them a little bit of buffer as well.
So, and I had gotten an email about even attendance, a teacher taking attendance virtually, and that was sort of what do we have to do, and from the parent, some stress over some feeling like there was a requirement related to that. So I'm assuming if they're virtually taking attendance, that's more of a check-in. That's not a mandated something.
Yes, ma'am. And that's really just teachers doing the best with what they know right now. And what we're doing is we're using, as things come in each day, we're using that information to inform us in best practices to set everything up for the next week. And so we'll continue to do that as information is provided to us. We want to continue to learn from those opportunities, and then we'll roll out hopefully what we anticipate to be a better model at the beginning of the next week.
Okay, great. Thank
Yes, ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Do we have, do you have any other questions?
I still have one more question about, and I think it's to you, Ms. Virginia. With our non-exempt staff, I know we've heard some about this, but how are cafeteria workers and bus drivers doing now? Those that were very concerned about being able to work. Can you give us a status on that? What are the numbers we have in terms of cafeteria staff? And I think that might be also Ms. Laura.
Yes, I would have to defer to Ms. Francisco on the exact numbers when it comes to food service, but I can tell you from the human resources standpoint and the supports that we've made available, we have done that across the board to all of our non-exempt groups so that we can keep them whole and keep them employed to the extent possible, absent any guidance at this time from any state or other authorities that would allow us the option to provide paid leave or paid compensation to the employees if we don't find them work. So that, for example, is why we were even putting out remote learning opportunities that both our non-exempt and exempt staff could use from home. I want to take a moment on that and say thank you very much to all of our employees for their flexibility and their patience and us making those options available. I can tell you that there are many, many school districts across the nation, not just our state, who are using similar or same platforms to access that learning. So we did receive some inquiries like the site is down or the link might not be working properly. I can assure employees that it is. Please continue to have patience and go in and try to access those materials. We've been since notified by one particular vendor that operates the My Talent, where a lot of those courses are stored, that things should be up and running smoothly again. So those are things that are beyond our control, but again, we want to thank all of our staff for the flexibility that they've shown and the patience in us providing these work opportunities, and I'll turn it over to Laura.
So in addition to the 200-plus cafeteria workers that are working at the sites, we have several hundred each of bus drivers and cafeteria workers that signed up for an opportunity they were offered to participate with our custodial teams at each of the schools to do a deep, thorough cleaning for the extent of this week, because at the time we created that plan, we didn't know that today's announcement was coming. So we're also developing other opportunities as we can, for instance, putting additional bus routes for meal delivery that would use both cafeteria workers and bus drivers. So we're evolving this as it goes and trying to offer as many opportunities as we can for folks.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any more questions for Ms. Pichot? No? All right, I know we have some food. Well, I would just say thank you for, this is as heavily as the fate of our students weighs on me, I am equally concerned for our 18,000 employees and that they can be safe and healthy and continue to get a paycheck.
And Madam Chair, I want to thank you for raising the social and emotional support discussion when it came to students. It's incredibly important that we also expand that to staff as well.
That's right.
And totally in line with your comments. So I would like to also take this opportunity to remind all staff that we do have an employee assistance program. It's called Life Care. Employees can get information about that program on our website. But if they cannot find that, if they don't want to, go through the trouble of trying to navigate the site to find it, please reach out to our employee benefits office. That they should be able to find the information very easily on the website, and our staff is happily ready to assist anyone with referrals through that program. That is such a valuable asset or program that we have that's available to our staff that they should always feel free to take advantage of.
That's great.
Thank you. So I'm sure we have a few more questions for Ms. Francisco about food. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you for all this work. It is just amazing, and it is so affirming to the community and to the people who are doing it. So I have visited a number of sites, and I just get in the car. Of course, we've social distanced. We've been obeying all the rules, but I just get in the car and I give thanks for the incredible folks that are working in those sites. And what I've seen is it's almost becoming a one-stop shop. Again, we've got academic paperwork going out, you've got technology going out, you've got food going out, and on Friday, Second Harvest has come with their food. And then today, I got to witness, I know one of our partners, and I'm going to go ahead and say Promising Pages for all the great work. They've prepackaged books so that students aren't rifling through books, but they've handed a package that would be appropriate for the students that live in that home. So it is just amazing, and the smiles and the connections that our students and the cafeteria workers that they see each day. I even got to experience a reunion of a high school student with their elementary school cafeteria workers, which was really cool. So that's great. So I just want, again, this sort of a public service announcement, the shelter in place or the stay-at-home order. Our sites are open. Is that correct?
Yes.
As far as we know, yes.
Yes.
They're all saying yes. I haven't heard
Food delivery
differently.
continues, and all those other one-stop shop items will be there. From what I quickly read, looks like the nonprofits that are assisting our families and, again, our community partners who have just come along beside us so seamlessly and beautifully. All that will continue, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, there's an FAQ, and that, I mean, literally, I don't know which camera to look at, but just so people know who are watching this, we'll make a plan, and then everything turns upside down with new guidance or a new executive order. And so that, that happened this afternoon. As hours before this meeting began, we learned of the shelter-in-place order for Mecklenburg County, which we knew was a possibility to come, but, it was issued. We were literally still reading the order as we're ready to come into this meeting. And so we're still assessing everything that's in that order and how it impacts our schools. But there's an FAQ that the county released with the order, and it specifically says when they talk about essential travel, what counts as essential travel. Travel to or from educational institutions for purposes of receiving materials, for distance learning, for receiving meals, and other related services.
Perfect.
So that's good to know. Thank you, Mecklenburg County, for spelling that out.
And thank you, Mrs. Marshall, for mentioning that. And I should have done this in the beginning, but I was focused on getting through my slide. I cannot say enough about Kathy Beam, our Executive Director for School Nutrition, and Adam Johnson, our Executive Director for Transportation, for getting all of this going so quickly and fairly seamlessly. And the workers in particular who are staffing these sites and making sure that kids and families get this food that, obviously is being well used with 116,000 meals in a week. So I cannot say enough about them. And you're right, they have smiles on their faces all the time.
And the numbers are increasing daily,
They are.
being used. Perfect.
Thank you. Any other? I just have one more question.
Sure.
If a teacher is checking in on a student and finds out that the student's family needs food and cannot get to, I know we've got this great safety net with all these partnerships with community organizations who are bringing food to families who do not have the transportation to come into our sites, but there are still some children that are slipping through the cracks. As teachers identify who those students are, or as social workers identify who those students are, what should they do? Who should they tell?
They just need to call school nutrition because that's already happening and we're making individual deliveries to families.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so it's that phone number for school nutrition, which
Correct.
we'll blast
Yes.
on our social media.
And I can give that out right now, and we can continue to blast it out on social media. It's 980-343-6041. 980-343-6041. There's also an email address, which is lunch, LUNCH, @cms.k12.nc.us.
All right. Well, thank you very much to all the staff, and I want to thank the board members for all the good questions and just bringing forth all the, the questions that we've been getting from our teachers and parents. I know we've spent a lot of time on this portion of the agenda, but this is the most important thing that we're doing tonight. So thank you all for your patience, and I guess we will move on to the next item on the agenda.
Madam Chair, can I share something?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to close out this part of the conversation to say that this pandemic has had far-reaching impact. And as many families know, we've had to, earlier on, cancel many events because of the health concerns and out of an abundance of caution. And so I wanted to share with the board and share with our families tonight that another event that we're unfortunately having to add to that list are proms for the current school year, the 2019-2020 school year. Communications will be going home to families this week, and we continue to work with families and vendors on this particular matter. We wanted to let families know in a timely manner so that they can plan accordingly. We felt that this was the prudent thing to do. We just unfortunately had to make this decision, but we will continue to work with families and vendors around this topic.
All right, thank you.
Am I clear on that, that proms are canceled? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard everything except the word cancel in that sentence.
Yes, we are canceling our proms. We're not alone. Other districts are moving in the same direction or already have done so. Out of an abundance of caution, we can't guarantee that, well, we haven't reached our peak yet in terms of what we're hearing from our health officials in our community, and we just want our families and our students to be safe, and we felt this was the best thing to do.
Okay, I understand and I agree. I just didn't hear the word cancel in all of that sentence that you said prior to my question.
My apology.
Thank you.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is a little bit different. Ordinarily, we would have a full presentation, management oversight report on transportation. This is something that the Facilities and Operations Committee had heard this presentation recently and recommended that it be shared with the full board and with the public. But given the current state of affairs, we've decided to put this report online. So it will be on our board docs website. And we're encouraging our constituents to, if you have an interest, to go download that report and take a look at it. It's got some really valuable information and some great work that it's just good to know about what our transportation staff is doing. But due to our focus on COVID-19 right now, we just decided not to devote a whole lot of time to it tonight. And so with that, I turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, as Mr. Dennis Lacaria is making his way to the podium, Dennis is a consultant working with CMS under the leadership of our Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Carol Stamper. And this is an opportunity, this presentation will give us an opportunity to all hear where we've been in the most recent months, and then also an opportunity to really look ahead as it relates to our facilities and capital needs. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lacaria.
And actually, before you start, Mr. Lacaria, just one more quick bit of context. So the transportation oversight report we just put online. This report on the capital needs assessment is something that we have planned and promised the community that we would come back and report on March 24th. We did not know how quickly COVID-19 was going to overtake our community at that point, and yet there is some work of the district that is essential that needs to continue regardless. This is, our long-term capital needs are not going away, and the need for our community to be engaged in that work is not going away. And so we did decide to continue with this report, but we're kind of streamlining it. So Mr. Lacaria is going to, it's a hefty report here, but he's just going to give us a quick 10-minute presentation, and then we'll do some questions. But I'm going to, just for the sake of being able to get our staff home, I wanted to allow all the time in the world for our questions on COVID-19. For this portion of the agenda, I'm going to ask us to hold your questions until the end, and then each board member will have up to 3 minutes worth of questions. So you'll each get one chance to ask your question or questions within a 3-minute time limit. And with that, it's all yours, Mr. Lacaria.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Winston. Glad to be here tonight to take us on the next step in our journey through the Long Range Facilities Master Plan. Again, just setting the table that we've not done this work comprehensively since about 2005, 2006 in the wake of an unsuccessful bond referendum. So we believe that it's time, based on the changes in our community, that we do that work. And then we know that we're standing at a place, because this work hasn't been done for quite some time, that we do have, as it appears to be the case with so many things right now, a lot more questions than answers. So we have started community engagement and information sessions. These have included existing groups such as MEAC. We've met with Steel Creek Community Association, and we had 2 town hall meetings, one at Northwest School of the Arts and one at Providence High School. There were 2 additional meetings that were scheduled for East Meck and Mauer Creek High School, which had to be canceled because of the concerns with COVID. So this is kind of a high-level overview of those initial conversations that we've had. We talked to folks about some very basic things in order to set some baseline understanding of terms that we're going to be using as we work through this process, as simple as what really is a capital project. We've talked about how we've got assumptions, methodologies, and standards that make up all of those components, and we as a community have to look at how all of those things fit together as we build this plan. And we got quite a bit of feedback, and as we move through the process, this will be shared both online with the board in the final report and as we go. But this is actual photocopies of the cards, the note cards that we received from folks in the town hall meetings. And this came from, again, a variety of different places and people. We had some program topics, and those are the sort of things that this long-range facilities master plan is designed to solve for. Questions about how we prioritize projects, questions about new urban school designs, conversations around what athletic amenities does a high school really have to have, and how does funding work. And then some project-specific topics, which is a thread that we're working in parallel, much like some other things that we're working in parallel, where we'll be going back and having meetings about things that are specific to projects that were in the 2017 bond. We'd set up a couple of those meetings, including with the West Charlotte Alumni Association, which had to be rescheduled again because of concerns around COVID, and we've already rescheduled those, hopefully far enough out that we can have those again. But we are anticipating additional project meetings for projects that have already been kicked off and have seen some changes, as well as the project kickoff meetings for those projects that have not yet started. And just so everybody remembers, we've got about 55% of the projects in the 2017 bond in some form or fashion underway. So this is kind of an overview of the next steps in the community process. We have recorded a voiceover for the presentation that was delivered at the town hall, so we're going to be standing up a new web page for the long-range facilities master plan, a new web page for construction. That video and that presentation will go there. This presentation will go there, and it'll become an archive for the documents as we move forward, so that folks can go to one spot and see this information. And again, just to remind everybody, the overarching timeline that we're working on is to do this work with an eye towards developing a draft capital needs assessment in January 2021, then be able to take that on the road and get feedback on that draft capital needs assessment, synthesize new data as we have new 20th day number, new projection numbers and things in 2021, revise that for 2022, again, take that back to the community, test it again, feed the new information through it, and then work towards what we're still planning for a 2023 capital improvement plan. So again, March, we're going to be standing up all the presentations that we've shared, including this one tonight. And then we're going to figure out how we're going to deal with the community engagement going forward. So those may be Zoom meetings if we're not able to do stuff in person, but we are actively seeking ways to get feedback from the community as we move through this process. It may not be perfect, it may not be face-to-face, but we're committed to collecting that feedback and that information. So the topic for April is building standards and specifications. May, we're going to look at academic standards and specifications, and I say that with the caveat, like everything else, that will be COVID dependent. So if our academic folks have something else that they need to be doing besides supporting this effort, we will adjust the calendar as well. June, we'll take a look at facility condition and maintenance. July and August, we'll kind of pause, see where we are, assess the feedback that we've gotten to that point, and put together an interim report. Then in September and October, we will look at future schools and future designs and start talking about how to build more urban sort of schools, smaller real estate requirements, those sorts of things. November, we'll talk about student enrollment and projections. December, move through the rubric, project prioritization, with, again, the eye towards delivering a draft capital needs assessment to the board in January 2021. and then refreshing that with the data and moving forward. So we recognize that we have work to do together with this community even at this time, and that's why things are going to be proceeding on these parallel paths, including with the project-specific meetings. We talked to you about where we thought construction costs might be. That's all out the window right now. We're in the process of bidding the 2 high schools, so we'll have an idea for numbers for that, but that still doesn't necessarily tell us about what conditions going to be in September, let alone in 2023. But they will be more data points, and we're going to have to figure out where we are relative to escalation in the near term and in the longer term as the economy recovers or doesn't. And so those decisions and others will impact the bond and the way that we build the 2021 CNA and ultimately build towards that CIP. And again, we've shared with the community the considerations for the work, that we want to focus on what's best for our students first. We want to make sure that we're being as transparent as we can possibly be, that we're going to honor the program that we develop, and that we will not make decisions solely based on cost. And again, the challenge here right now is to make sure we hear from the community, but we are going to find ways to hear from the community, and we'll answer these questions together. And that's how we're moving through this, and if anybody wants to contact me, that's my email address, and I await your questions and comments. Thanks.
Wow. Any questions? Ms. Byers-Bailey?
That was fast. And I guess for those in my community in West Charlotte, all they really want to know is, are you building the school? Where is it, and when will it be up?
And so right now, we are fully intending to deliver that school on the schedule that we're on right now. The bids are in hand right now. We're actually going through the bid tabs and trying to figure out what that actually means for the cost of the school versus the budgeted number. But we are still proceeding on our original, on the timeline that we have been on relative to delivery of that school.
And the same with the Palisades School?
Yes, ma'am. Nothing at this time tells us anything different.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shipp?
Oh, actually, that was my question.
Oh, that was your, that was a nod, yeah.
The West Charlotte
Yes,
Olympic
ma'am.
relief, as long as we're still on track.
Yes, got those bids in to do today as well, I believe. So waiting on better information.
Okay. Anybody? No? Ms. Sawyer, Ms. Marshall, Mr. Strain?
Sure. Hi, Dennis.
Hello, sir.
So in the community engagement sessions, there was some mixed messaging, due in no small part to myself, but I know it wasn't limited to myself either, that we were going to have a capital projects community engagement. Obviously, this focuses almost entirely on the capital needs assessment. And so I think a lot of the feedback which will be shared, which came from the community where I was in attendance anyway, was about interest in talking about the projects, to your point, as opposed to questions about the capital needs assessment. And so, you know, they're to your point, they're 2 parallel paths. They certainly have intersection points, but I think it's critical that we're clear as to those project-specific or 2017 bond-specific conversations and our broader program plans and capital needs assessment that we're starting to undertake. Is there anything that you could share at this point with the community that says, here are the 2 parallel paths and the intent to address those needs?
Sure. And so specifically to that point, we were trying to set, I believe right now the schedule that we're on was to bring the high school contracts to you April 28th, with the idea being then that we would have an opportunity to have community engagement specific to the West Charlotte High School and the Palisades High School in early May. So that's a timeline that we're working on relative to being able to have a community-specific conversation relative to those 2 specific projects. If we can't have more than 5 people in a room, then we're going to have to figure out whether we can do that virtually or what that looks like. But that was the timeline that we were on. So as we have these milestones, because we want to be fully transparent with the community, so as we're bringing the construction contracts forward and sharing that information with the board and sharing that information with the public, that becomes a natural inflection point whereby we can set those sort of community meetings to talk about the specific project, with all of that being under the umbrella, basically, of the long-range facilities master plan work. And as we're learning things because of those contracts, like the dollar values that will inform that planning, the long-range planning process that will incorporate those sort of facts and figures going forward. So we will be very, very clear and intentional about delineating those things, subject to whether or not we can all be in a room or not, and how we're going to manage that.
Thank you for that. We know that one of the significant issues that came up was the variance between our current high school operational environments and the efficiency level that was planned in some of the decisions that we made earlier as a board. What steps are being taken to discuss and rationalize that variance?
And I think that's fair. As we're moving through these and we're confirming these assumptions, then we will take those next steps to filter those assumptions through the plan and then determine what steps we need to take to operationalize those assumptions. So it's a process. We've got a plan for the outcome we want, and then once we've decided on the outcome we want, come up with a plan to implement that and then actually implement that. And that's kind of our shared challenge.
Thank you.
My only question is, I'll just reiterate what Ms. Shipp and what Ms. Byers-Bailey were asking about potential for delays, because as we've, watched shutdowns, I know some folks have asked, has this shut down, the trades and the bidding process? So my understanding from you is that thus far that has not been the case.
As of now, that's not the case, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, so with that caveat, there was nothing that I saw in the order that came from the county today that precluded construction activities from continuing to take place, especially construction activities related to government facilities. So we don't, in and of itself, expect that anything that happened today is going to impact the delivery of a project. What the world looks like a month from now, my crystal ball's in the shop, but based on where we are right now, we believe we're progressing.
All right, that's good news, a little glimmer of light. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Lecaria. So our next report is another item of essential business that, cannot stop, even though sometimes it feels strange to do business as usual. But with that, I will let you introduce.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, I was going to, and she's already gotten a head start, going to invite Sheila Shirley, our Chief Financial Officer, forward to the table. And as we make this presentation, I just wanted to grab a copy of or not a copy.
You want this? Y'all are all washing your hands after you touch all these things, right? Everybody's washing their hands.
I got my, if you need some.
She's always prepared.
Might want to check it, Ernest. I'm not sure. He said it might not be working.
Good.
You have the magic touch.
We'll see about that.
I was just going to say, let it be so.
Well, thank you again, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And thank you, Ms. Shirley, for joining us here at the table. I am extremely excited to recommend this evening to our board a 2020-21 proposed operating budget. And I will share that our staff, my team, we began working on the budget in November, which seems like a long time ago. And it has been a long time. I think we have spent collectively somewhere in the range of 70 hours working on the budget, trying to prioritize and lift up our best thinking. And so what I and Ms. Shirley will present tonight is what we believe is a well-thought-out, comprehensive budget that does meet the needs of our students and our staff. We have heard in this budget process as recently as a few hours ago from our county partners. And they have shared that the crisis that we're in, COVID-19, while they are not sure what the long-term impact will be, this current situation will have an impact on their revenue streams. They did acknowledge to us that this year and next year will be a challenge for them. So we wanted to share that context with you because we think that's important. We have tried to be very deliberate in terms of what we're asking for, what we're recommending. And even though we face an uncertain financial picture, this budget does address our core needs. Let me move to this slide. So our current state, and I need to acknowledge that while we have spent a great deal of time on the budget, we have encountered a world crisis, a fragile community, and an uncertain financial forecast. And I think it's important to lift that up because we certainly had no idea and certainly could not plan for some of the things that we're seeing now. So what I'd like to recommend is that staff and I continue to work with the board now until the end of April before we actually finalize our budget ask to determine if any changes are needed in light of the recent crisis that we're experiencing. So we have a strategic plan that we're working from and that our budget request recommendation is grounded in. And as you all know, that our strategic plan has 2 overarching commitments around equity and culture, 3 goals, and 2 strategies that drive that strategic plan. On this slide, you'll see a little bit more detail, some specific actions that help us achieve our goals and some specific targets that we've actually set. On this particular slide, this is just a reminder of our funding, where it comes from, and how is it used. As you'll note on the chart on the left-hand side, the state provides 58% of our budget, and that is followed by the county at 33% and federal and other funding at 9%. On the chart on the right-hand side, you'll notice that salary and benefits make up 83% of our budget, and that is consistent with prior years. Purchase services makes up 9%, and supplies and materials are comprised of 4%. I just want to highlight that of the 83% in salary and benefits, about 90% is allocated for school-based staff. And the largest percent of that is our certified staff, our teachers, our counselors, and our social workers. So, what does our community need? We believe that our community needs stability. Our schools are community hubs for many, and they will be the single place that seems like a sense of normalcy, like it was before COVID-19. When we look at our proposed budget and the investments, we believe those investments reinforce the actual foundation, and those fall largely within 3 buckets. They are students, staff, and support. And when I talk about support, we're talking about support for students and staff. We think it's important to highlight that, as we did in the previous COVID-19 update to the board. So now I would like to talk about some specifics, things that we're proposing to support that foundation. And I will start with sustaining operations. You'll notice that the first item is around House Bill 90, enhancement teachers, local supplement. This would be year 3 of our K-3 class size reduction. And these teacher positions would be for art, music, physical education, et cetera. The next item is the commitment that we've made to our modernization project. This would be year 2 of a 3-year project. The next category is investing in employees. The first item, Phase 2, market rate adjustment for our hourly staff to increase that minimum to $14.11 an hour. This would be the second step in that process. You all will recall that this school year, the board actually moved that amount to $13.22, and our ultimate goal in the immediate future is to move that amount to $15 an hour, and that $14.11 is sort of a midway point to get us there. Next, we're proposing salary increase for certified staff, principals, and non-certified staff. We actually don't control this, but we did include it for the time being so that we could plan potentially for what the state actually might do. And this is our best estimate of what may come to fruition if the state enacts a budget for next year. And just for context, we're using the conference budget that was approved in June by both the House and the Senate. The next item in this category is health and retirement rate increases, and this is typically defined by the state. I'll go to the last category around student growth and additional space. We do have to account for enrollment growth, charter school cost, and additional staffing, school resource officer contract, maintenance and operating costs for 1 new and 2 replacement schools. The 1 new school is the Ray Farm STEAM Academy, which will be a K-8 school, and the 2 replacement schools are Collinswood and Montclair. You just wanted to note that in this particular section, the majority of the cost here that we anticipate are for charter school growth. Next, supporting our kids. We've talked a little bit about the importance of social and emotional learning support. And I want to highlight this because it remains a priority for us here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And we also know that our county partners have traditionally supported this in the past as well. The second item here, exceptional children staffing and special education support. We need to be able to provide support for our exceptional children population, which is actually growing. But I do want to highlight something that I overlooked in the first bullet around social emotional support and provide some context. This proposal would allow us to hire 15 additional counselors, 15 additional social workers, 5 psychologists, and 2 behavioral specialists. Now, I know there's been a lot of conversation amongst the board, in the community, and with our county partners about moving toward the recommended ratios for these categories. And this certainly doesn't get us there quite yet, but we do believe it would be a step in the right direction. So next, I want to just highlight the third bullet or item is around safety and security. Safety and security remains a top priority in the district, and this would allow us to add some additional campus security associates and staffing to support our security initiatives. And then last, around building services, preventive maintenance, and staffing. We do believe that how our buildings look and maintained is important. That matters. And so we're requesting some additional funding for that as well. So this proposed budget covers providing support through these unprecedented times. I just wanted to highlight again that certainly we wanted to be mindful of the times that we're in and the guidance that was provided from our partners at the county, and in trying to keep this budget recommendation at a reasonable level, and that's where we landed with this. And so as I wrap up this presentation, just wanted to note that this budget recommendation represents about a $36.8 million increase in county appropriations over the prior year. We really did limit this request for the most part to the things that we're just obligated to do as a district. Okay. And then I wanted to highlight some next steps in this process on April the 8th, whether that be in person or virtually. We're scheduled to have a public hearing on the budget recommendation. And then later in April, on April the 28th, the board is scheduled to approve the 2020-21 operating budget. And so I want to thank you all and would like to open the floor to any questions that you may have.
And before we go to questions, just a little more context that since we're probably moving into electronic meetings in the foreseeable future, we are going to figure out the protocol for how, for the public hearings, for how people can submit their feedback and have us read that into the record. So stay tuned on all of that. That's part of the brave new world that we're adapting to. But because of the bylaw that we suspended at the beginning of this meeting, that frees us up to do that. And again, in a normal year, in a normal budget cycle, this would be our night for sort of high-level conceptual questions, and then we would have a couple of board workshops where we'd really dive into the nitty-gritty and really, ask our detailed questions. Hopefully we can still do that, but that will be most likely electronically. We'll do some board workshops that are electronic and open to the public through Zoom or some platform like that. So just know that that is to come. But while it might seem odd to be moving forward with this business at a time like this, we have to have a budget for next year. And we have to present that budget request to the county by a certain date in May, regardless of what's going on in the world. And so this is just some of that essential business that must go on. And thank you all for showing up for it tonight, although we do not begrudge those who were not able to join us tonight because, health and safety comes first right now. So with that, any questions? Okay, Mr. Strain.
Sheila, thanks so much for putting this together. And certainly Mr. Winston for walking through it with us. I just have two questions at this stage. I'll withhold my more detailed questions for the workshops that we discussed. There are not slide numbers. In the slide, support for the foundation. In the investing in employees, it talks about the market rate adjustments to increase to 1411 minimum and compression adjustments. I think last year, Ms. Shirley, a market study was done, is that right? That we identified for each position what those market rates were. I know this is driving, and Mr. Superintendent, you talked about moving towards a $15 minimum. I'd like to better understand the differentiation between the market rates for those positions and what we're moving to. That's not to say judge one way or the other, but we need to do so consciously to make sure that if we're moving to a $15 minimum wage, we understand what the market rates are for those positions, and that this board has decided to move to $15, and then, of course, the compression adjustments as a result as well, and what those impacts are.
Yeah, I'll have to defer that to Christine, but I will ask her to share that information.
Okay, thanks.
Because that decision was made
I understand.
last year in terms of, we talked about that, but we
Yep.
made the decision that we were going to proceed with the movement. And you recall, we went to 1322. I think you raised that same question last year, so we can revisit that.
Thank you, appreciate it. And then on the following slide, supporting our kids, we certainly had a conversation last year about SROs and CSAs in our elementary schools, and we were, there was certainly a staff recommendation that we started moving down that road. I think it's fair to say that both the chief and just the information we have in terms of our elementary schools is that there's still coverage that's required there, and would like to understand what the staff recommendation looks like. Mr. Superintendent, I think you mentioned our campus security associates. I don't know what that means in terms of the context of the elementary schools, but I'd like to make sure I understand what your recommendation is in that space that's represented here.
So specifically, we're asking or recommending that we bring on 15 additional campus security associates, and that would be at the secondary level to help provide coverage there. As the board knows, one of the things that we did this year with your support was to expand our security screenings at our schools. We began previously at the high school level, and we expanded that into the middle schools, and we need some additional staffing to help us continuously carry out that initiative with fidelity. And so that would be the bulk of this particular request. The other part of it would be to help support our security initiatives. We've added a lot of new equipment. We've upgraded some equipment, cameras, also fire alarms or alarms and locks, and we do need the staffing to help maintain that.
Right. So so the next time we have a chat, as we dive down into this, I'd like to better understand what that risk profile is at the elementary level. That certainly staff identified as a need last year, and would like to better understand that in terms of you not bringing it forward this year. Okay. Thanks.
Will do. Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Ms. Marshall?
And thank you again for your work on this. Again, I know the conversation was, we don't really want to have to talk about this now, but we have to talk about this now. We have to start planning for the next year and meet our statutory requirements. So that's why we're here. And I was a parent of students during our last really big financial crisis time, and so lots of things can change. And I think, too, we need to be mindful of what we know now and what we will know at another time, but to know that our needs are still so great no matter what happens. So I just want to, for just a second, look at the building services, preventive maintenance, and staffing. I think that the building service preventive maintenance is by and large the biggest part of that.
It's $5 million.
It's $5 million. And so, and that really is, it's all of us understand on our own houses that if we do some preventive maintenance, it makes the dollars that we put in that capital asset go much, much further. So this is spending some money to save some money, really, and I think that that's something. But I also want us to think about, too, in terms of the environment that we're in, and I believe the environment we're going to be in, our bathrooms, our facilities were not built for pandemics. They were not, no one was designed for this. And I know we have had a lot of questions about hygiene, and it did a little bit of back of the napkin calculation, and I think we've sort of, one window, several of us figured out that it might take, in our large high schools, a custodian the entire day to fill up all the soap dispensers one time. So we may need to look at, in terms of personnel to help with that, and even fixtures that accommodate a different environment. We've had to adjust with security as we've gone through time. So I think this is something, as we are looking at this right now and things to talk to the county about, that's It's something we need to consider. I think anything involved in plumbing, anything involved in hygiene, and the maintenance of our buildings is really important, because that's going to make our academics more fruitful for our students and keep our students safe. So I just want to put that out there to be thinking about, and knowing that this building preventive maintenance is really important. How do we keep going with that and do the things that we need to do in the future? Thank you.
Ms. Sawyer?
I think following up on that is the sort of personnel part of that, keeping our buildings clean and well-maintained. And I know with our current pay structure, we've had a hard time keeping custodians because we just don't pay enough, don't pay competitively with other opportunities in the town. And I would love for us to look at, what the differential would be to go from that 1411 to 1475 or closer to 15, so that we can, our funding partners can know what that differential is and know what we're facing if we want to be competitive in our hiring.
Ms. Shipp?
I just wanted to add on that, too. This is so critical this time, as Ms. Marshall mentioned, and even Ms. Sawyer. This is important, too, as we look at the formula for how we decide the number of custodians in a building. Because right now, when we're talking about deep cleaning, of course, we have the opportunity now to use additional staff, such as our bus drivers and maybe some other hourly employees. But on a regular basis, we're talking about schools that are older facilities with only 2 custodians working an entire building. Maintenance is definitely tougher in an older building as opposed to a new building, as we maintain cleanliness. And that was a major issue with what has just happened, because we definitely had schools that did not have the custodial staff to even begin to clean these schools, when we're talking about keeping soap in the dispensers, keeping toilet paper in the bathrooms. This is a real issue. Of course, I've gotten a chance on a personal level to see it. So I think we really need to talk about that too, with the number of custodians we have in the building. We've pulled, as you know, over the years, the numbers down. And even when we're trying to look at ways to maintain security of buildings, we have used those custodians, and of course, they can't work overtime, and they've talked about that as well when we have extra activities. And the custodians have been the ones to lock up the schools. Do you know they have said, like, I can't do this because I can't go overtime, so they don't have that. And it's not enough of them. Usually it's just the head custodian doing a lot of the work in these buildings. And I think that's very important as we look at keeping our schools clean, all schools, regardless of whether they're new buildings or older buildings.
Anything else? Well, thank you. I just will, I hear at least 70 hours of work went into crafting this budget.
That was just cabinet.
Just
Yours
on.
is probably 100.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, times something. And then, and that was forecasting a certain financial environment. And then in the last week or two, and even today, the world turned upside down, and the world might turn upside down a few more times before the next time we meet to talk about this again. So I just want to thank you and your staff for their hard work and flexibility and stamina. And we will adjust, and we will get through this and advocate for the best possible budget to serve our children and our staff, whatever, the economic realities are that we face.
Thank you.
So thank you. And with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, show of hands. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Good job.